was Snooty Fox by Mr. Richie Everett, who came down to the studio with his band and played that live for us just last week. First, on our show tonight we have some news from the recently reformed American Union state.
Hey Nathaniel, good to see you there. Some of the regulars in here, guys.
It has been little over 3 weeks since William Dudley Pelly and his silver shirt militia seized control following President Long's arrest on Saturday. But today, Congress, under pressure from the silver shirts, have enacted martial law once again and are pushing for Pelly to be inaugurated as the second president of this Christian Commonwealth of America, before long has even gone to trial. It has only been 2 months after the official end to hostilities and the end of the Civil War. Charles Lindbergh has denounced this action from the Silver Shirts, claiming it is a step towards a dictatorship. Lindbergh saying, "It goes against the American values we fought for." Father Charles Coughlin, a native of Ontario, who has since moved to America, has shown his support for Pelly's actions, advocating on his radio show that Pelly should have been president in the first place. He's a good man with good, upstanding Christian values. He would not falter to greed and sway to Wall Street like Mr. Long. More on America after this. David, the editor, the man.
It would be. It would be.
Excellent. What's up, man? Having a good weekend?
Absolutely.
Long sleep after a long project.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a great thing to look forward to at the very end of it. Are we live already?
Yeah, we're live. We're live. I mean, it's running pre-stream, which means there's no video, but it is passing our audio on. Yeah.
Ah, right.
Checking. We usually go live at 9 p.m. so that is our time. So that would be 3 p.m. EST, East Coast time. I don't know what that is in Pacific time. Somewhere early.
Oh yeah, let me mute the stream for myself so I don't hear myself, but I can still watch.
Yeah, you'll want to, for those on Discord in the group chat, you'll want to either mute me on Discord or mute the stream. Like pick one or two, or it's gonna double loop and it's gonna be a wonderful. You know that thing they do on the radio when they take a call, but the radio is also on and it creates this feedback loop.
Tell me.
Oh, I've never heard that. Yeah, so basically when you're receiving an audio signal, you're blasting it and you're sending it back. Like with this Discord call and a live stream, for example, then what's going to happen is you get this sort of tone, a very high-pitched fluting tone, which is going to keep...
Oh, yeah,
and it's deafening because it keeps recording itself and becoming louder onto itself. That's feedback loop, feedback tone.
Yeah, right. No, I've seen that before. Unfortunately, I've been on the receiving end of that a few times.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with that stuff. I also printed our script today, which I think is very professional of us. I also have
printed it.
I printed the script for the live stream. I see you have not written out your questions. You're gonna.
I have. It should be there. I didn't actually write out my questions because I wanted to be prepared. So
is this a versioning issue, David? Are we in versioning conflict once again?
It would be true to form to end up this entire project with a versioning issue. That seems apt. No, I actually did write it in the live stream script that you sent to me.
Got it. No, but I have my questions written out, so we'll do a little segment.
That's great. I've got my answers written out. So it's not important if you see them. It's important that I can read them. So I give media trained answers, so I don't reveal anything that's not supposed to be revealed.
Perfect. Also, so Gabriel Flamefang has come in, and we've managed to pre-tape his Q&A segment. So we do have, I ran it through Premiere real quick and got in my own answer. So we have him answering his segment, which is really cool.
Nice.
1 second, I need to test some audio. Which is really cool.
Nice.
1 second, I need to test some audio. Which is really cool.
Nice.
Okay, that's perfect. No, what we're going to do, guys, so for those of you watching the live stream, there are 3 parts to this premiere. The first part will simply be a quick introduction of the project for those who are new. Then we're just going to run the full episode. It is a 1 hour 15 minute, I think, DiJKHUIS, the first part. What was that, David? You remember the edit?
Yeah, so the first part was, I think, about an hour, I believe, content total, so excluding intro and outro. And the second part is about 45 minutes.
Yeah. So once we have that full premiere watched, we are going to do a Q&A. So we have a bit of part with you, David, a small segment with me, and then a David segment with Flamefang, who talks a little bit more. And I'm also going to direct people basically for, I think, a little more context. You should, if you're interested in learning more about like China in Kaiserreich, what you should absolutely do after this live stream is go to Flamefang's PDXCon 2019's PDXCon talk, because he did a whole dev talk which is 20 minutes long, which we have gracefully recorded because we were there with recording equipment. And he basically breaks it all down. So what he was, what the ideas were, and it's just a lot of detail there that's not in the documentary. Like as a behind-the-scenes segment is really good.
It's still hard to believe we actually had to cut down on the scale of it, because 1 hour seems like a lot, but given the amount of content that we had to cut last second and throughout the process, like I remember in our first draft, we were talking about all the warlords, and this thing would have probably been double the size it actually ended up being.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna start us. Giving me a second. I see we're at 3 p.m. EST. Radio mix down. Get some music in here. Music. I'm gonna pull this from the archives.
He has ordered several police crackdowns on suspected nationalist leaders and officials of African-American refugees crossing the border.
Okay, let's take us live just for that project introduction. Hello everyone and welcome to Kaiserreich Documentary 9 premiere, which is of course the introduction of the Kaiserreich Documentary 9 project. We have for you a dual feature, which is a new thing. So dual feature meaning it is a 2-part documentary episode. 2-part documentary episode. The first part is the one we're presenting this Sunday. So the main release is also happening in 2 hours, I think. But if you're here, you're gonna watch it in premiere with us. We'll be giving you a little bit of behind the scenes, a little bit more context about this episode. We have, David, an entire script to get through. We're gonna do this cover to cover. It's a short script. Let's be honest.
It's not too bad. It's not too bad.
It's not. It's shorter than Kaiserreich Documentary 9/10. So as we were saying, this 2 hour 20 minutes, if you take both parts together, is the short version. So Flamefang said we should have probably gone to 4 hours, which would be a little too crazy, just budget-wise. So what we did is we released it as 2 episodes for 2 hours and 20 minutes in total, I want to say. Additionally, we are giving away Steam keys for our incredible sponsor, that is Easy Red 2, which is a mass warfare indie shooter. Me and Marco Amade, who is the lead developer of Easy Red 2, have been talking a lot these past few months. He's a really cool guy, big fan of the channel. So he's given us a bunch of keys. We are going to give them away. For that, you will have to keep an eye on the live stream chat. So I'm going to be in here with you guys. I'm going to be answering stuff. If possible, don't send me messages on Discord. Don't send me emails, because I have only 2 eyes, so I can only look at one channel at the same time. Going to look at this, going to give you guys, I think, 5 prize questions. Everyone who answers them correctly will receive a key for Easy Red 2 base game, as well as the Shanghai Nanking DLC. The documentary also opens with a really cool promo for the new 2.0 update of Easy Red 2. This is just, a really cool indie World War II shooter. You guys have to play it. We are going to do a Kaiserreich KCC Kaiser 6 community game as well. As you guys know, we have a gaming group. We do too much Arma, too much Antistasi. Some war crimes happen every now and then. But we will be playing Easy Red 2. Now, without further ado, we're just going to go up to the main event. David, I'm going to roll tape. I'm going to mute myself on the live stream. Just going to be chatting with you on Discord. Anyone who wants to join us on Discord can join us there. But for the rest of you, please enjoy Kaiserreich Documentary 9, titled Romance of the Warlords. We would like to thank this video's sponsor, the incredible World War II shooter Easy Red 2. It turns out the developers of Easy Red 2 are actually fans of the channel, and they reached out to cross-promote their new Shanghai Nanking DLC alongside our upcoming China content. This DLC, one of several campaign DLCs for the game, marks a massive expansion of the base game into the Eastern China theater of World War II. Easy Red 2 Shanghai Nanking is perhaps the only campaign that lets you experience the full-scale warfare of the Sino-Japanese War in historical battles across the Northern Plains, as well as the brutal urban combat of Shanghai. Easy Red 2 truly is a World War II battle simulator of an epic scale. The game features dozens of historical missions in both PvE and PvP, with fully playable infantry, vehicles and aircraft, plus a full map and mission editor. Honestly, you won't believe what $9 gets you with this game. More about Easy Red 2 after video, but for now, enjoy the show, cats.
Chaos continues to reign in the Chinese concessions as the situation deteriorates further. A growing mob of protesters, swept up by the late Sun Yat-sen's Kuomintang, have completely crippled all pretenses of colonial control in British Hong Kong and the Portuguese Macau. Imperial garrisons have retreated from most ports in Southeast Asia. In the home country, syndicalist revolutionaries have declared an end to the British Empire. Governor Claud Severn has thus far been unable to... And many fear
that the revolution that has swept the home islands will have indeed destroyed the empire. God save the king.
Sir, I must refuse. The closure of the broadcast would mean...
I will not hear of it, Mr. Faircrest. You are young. You have a future ahead of you. I will not see you dragged into this madness. You will leave with the next evacuation ship. The Royal Marines will escort you to the port.
Governor Severn, we are out of time. I have reports that a large group of protesters is on its way down Main Street at this very moment and intends to breach Government House. Kuomintang forces are just across the border and poised to invade. Governor, we have no choice. We must evacuate now.
Sir, where would I go? The Empire is crumbling. There is nowhere...
Go to Canada, son. Take your family. Go to Canada. And pray to God for better days. That is a direct order.
It was an honor, sir. May we meet again.
Miss Lansdale, I shall dictate.
Of course, Governor.
To the German Governor-General of Tonkin, Oberst Lieutenant V. Rabin. I write to you with the gravest sense of urgency regarding the current situation in Hong Kong, which has rapidly become untenable. As per orders from Admiral Anderson, the Royal Navy Commander-in-Chief in China, all non-essential soldiers, ships, and accompanying staff have been instructed to withdraw at once to Australia, where I am told a significant civil disturbance has erupted, as well as to India. In light of this withdrawal, the ongoing difficulties facing the Empire as a whole, and the massing of Chinese Kuomintang troops in Canton, I have been urged to consider an immediate evacuation of all British citizens and their families. However, I fear that upon the issuance of such an order, our vulnerability will be recognized, and the Kuomintang will descend upon this colony. The line must be drawn here, at Hong Kong. It cannot go without being said that our two nations are not, and have not been for some time, on the best of terms. Yet, we are both far from the fields of Flanders, and share a great deal more in common between ourselves than with any man of the Orient. I do not believe for a moment that a person such as yourself, a man of honor and good Christian bearing, would permit the surrender of this colony to the degenerate ways of syndicalists and thugs. As has been said before, blood is thicker than water. Herr Governor, as demanded by the responsibilities of my station, I must request from you a direct German intervention to ensure the continued security of Hong Kong and Southeast Asia. The British Empire can no longer uphold the security of her colonies. Our fates now lie in the hands of the Kaiserreich.
For centuries, while Europe languished in the sectarian chaos of the Dark Ages, China flourished. The Middle Kingdom was a land of innovation and culture, ruled by a system of central authority that would endure for millennia. Even while Athenian democracy was taking root in the West, China had already developed a sophisticated system of imperial governance, unmatched in scale and ambition. But the tides of history are rarely so kind. The first shock to China's imperial order came with the devastating Opium Wars against Britain in the 19th century. This conflict exposed the fragility of China's isolationist policies and traditions of empire. The Qing Empire, that had once stood as a beacon of order and stability, found itself humbled, forced to confront a harsh and unfamiliar world dominated by foreign powers. For China, the Opium Wars began a cycle of national decline that would haunt the country throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. This dark period would later become known as the Century of Humiliation. The ruling Qing dynasty proved ineffective at combating the continued decline of the state, and foreign empires carved China up into spheres of influence. Not only military and political defeats scarred China, but natural disasters as well. Vast floods and droughts caused widespread devastation. This accelerated a downward spiral for Chinese institutions, which would prove hard to escape. By the end of the 19th century, it was clear to many that the Qing dynasty had lost its right to rule China, the so-called Mandate of Heaven. Floods, famine, and the deadliest civil war in human history had inched the Qing ever closer to collapse, as radical and nationalist tensions rapidly approached the boiling point. As if to underline the weakness of the monarchy, every new crisis became yet another example of Beijing's impotence, another nail in the coffin of Qing rule. After a disastrous war with Japan in 1894 and a devastating series of floods and droughts, the population rose up. In 1899, hundreds of thousands of northern Chinese peasants took to the streets to demand an end to their troubles. These peasants directed their ire towards foreigners and Christians in China, whom they believed to be responsible for the state of the Middle Kingdom. It was these Christian missionaries that would first coin the term Boxer Rebellion, referring to the athletic and spiritual fraternities that started the revolt. Under the slogan, "Revive the Qing, destroy the foreigners," these Boxers marched on the capital and laid siege to the diplomatic quarter in Beijing, a watershed moment that sparked outrage in the West. To secure their citizens and national interests, 8 global powers formed a coalition against the Boxers. This so-called 8-nation alliance demanded that the Qing government restore order and beat back the rebels. The Qing rulers, instead, threw their support behind the Boxers. The decision would prove costly. The coalition responded with a punitive expedition and invaded China by force. Qing China, in the throes of revolution and severely behind Western technology and firepower, was in no place to resist such an invasion. After defeating Chinese forces at Tianjin and Beijing, the alliance forced the Qing into an unfavorable peace. This would be the harshest of many so-called unequal treaties, burdening the weakened Chinese state with costly indemnities and territorial concessions. Qing governors, attempting to navigate an increasingly stretched budget, began levying additional taxes on an already struggling populace and nationalizing provincially funded railways, in doing so returning their financing to foreign banks. Not long after, mass demonstrations erupted. The locals saw the plan as a betrayal. Once more, the Qing court seemed to bow to foreign interests. Thus continued a cycle of foreign intrusion and national decay that would shatter the population's remaining faith in the Manchu ruling class. In the end, this popular sentiment would turn against the institution of the empire itself and become a republican revolution to depose the Qing entirely. The 1911 Xinhai Revolution may have started as a railway protection movement, but when rebellious troops in Wuchang declared against the government, the call went up across China to resist and overthrow the Qing dynasty. The Qing had only one military force capable and modern enough to decisively quell the popular revolt, the Beiyang Army, built by the cunning Yuan Shikai. Formerly forced into exile and once seen as a threat, Yuan was called back into service as the dynasty's last hope. He agreed to lead the Beiyang army against the revolution on the condition that he was appointed prime minister. With much of his former competition dead or displaced, this sudden return restored Yuan's status as the most important power broker in the Qing court. The Qing emperor, Aisin-Jioro Puyi, was still only an infant, and the court needed a strong man to keep the monarchy afloat. As the Xinhai Revolution began to spread, power in Beijing converged around the Beiyang army. Yuan put the army's formidable power on full display. In head-to-head fighting, Beiyang forces dominated the revolutionaries. Despite these victories, the revolution had begun spreading at a rapid pace. Sensing an opportunity, Yuan made a bold move. The Beiyang leader opted to negotiate, presenting himself as a peacemaker and national power broker. Soon, the opportunistic general had struck a deal with the revolutionaries. Turning against his former benefactors, Yuan returned to Beijing to force the abdication of the young emperor Puyi and declare a new republic. At the same time, under the terms negotiated with the revolutionaries, he would become provisional president. With the Qing dynasty overthrown and the young republic struggling to assert itself, Yuan was able to even further leverage his political experience and military might. After all, beyond the absence of a monarchy and the promise of elections, the new republic wasn't so different from the old empire. Many of its leaders and bureaucrats, from the provinces to the capital, continued their roles under new titles and offices. Through bribery, blackmail, assassinations, and intimidation, Yuan Shikai twisted the fledgling Chinese democracy into his own personal dictatorship. Less than a year later, despite electoral defeats, Yuan dissolved the National Assembly and dispensed with democratic pretenses altogether. Yuan's rapid seizure of power would not go entirely uncontested. Nationalists across the country rose up to oppose Yuan's hollow Chinese republic. Chief among them was Sun Yat-sen, founder of the nationalist Kuomintang, or KMT, who had returned to China following the revolution. Rallying southern governors and their provincial forces, Sun tried to launch a general uprising, but the attempt would prove unsuccessful. Unable to seriously oppose the modernized Beiyang army, Sun's provincial troops and political support melted away. By 1914, 2 years after the revolution, Sun and his party had been forced back into exile. This defeat shattered Sun Yat-sen's belief that a democratic transition would be possible through popular action alone. China, Sun later surmised, could only be conquered by military might, and then given back to the people, a philosophy he would call the people's tutelage. For now, however, Yuan Shikai's sway over the Republic would endure. As conflict in China wound down, the first news of the Weltkrieg reached Beijing. While Yuan Shikai was hollowing out the young Chinese Republic, long-building tensions in Europe exploded into the Weltkrieg in July 1914. The war would come to China too, albeit indirectly. Only a month into the war, Japan occupied German holdings in China. Most importantly among these was Qingdao, the so-called jewel in Germany's imperial crown. While these territories remained Chinese on paper, Japan was quick to establish military rule. After the occupation of Qingdao, the full extent of Japan's imperial machinations became clear. With Europe locked in a rapidly escalating global conflict, Tokyo used the opportunity to present an ultimatum to Yuan Shikai. In its 21 demands, Japan insisted that China surrender control of Chinese railways, make major economic concessions, and even relinquish control over its own foreign affairs. Despite internal resistance and considerable international pressure, Japan would be forced to drop only the most outrageous demands. As European imperialism tottered in Asia, it became clear that, for China at least, one foreign power was being traded for another. While this was happening, Yuan Shikai's authoritarian streak quickly approached its zenith. Against all expectation, and to considerable outrage, Yuan Shikai declared a new Chinese empire, crowning himself emperor in December 1915. Yuan's insatiable ambition would be his undoing, however. Until 1915, much of Yuan's influence had come from his careful positioning. However, now that he had crowned himself emperor, those with Republican sympathies were outraged, while erstwhile allied governors, bureaucrats, and generals feared his massive centralization of power would diminish their own. It soon became clear that Yuan Shikai had overplayed his hand. Within weeks, much of southern China had risen under the banner of the pro-Republican National Protection Army. While the south entered open revolt, the north expressed its displeasure more quietly. Many of Yuan's subordinates openly questioned his rule, creating the first divides within the Beiyang army itself. Two of his closest allies, Feng Guojiang and Duan Qirui, broke with him after his proclamation as emperor. Although Yuan's reign would end with his premature abdication after a mere 83 days, the move had destroyed any semblance of Beiyang unity. Even after his death only months later, Yuan's long shadow would hang over China for decades to come. With Yuan's demise, what had begun as a modernized force of some 60,000 men began to transform into something altogether different and far less united. In order to fight the National Protection War, the Beiyang army had ballooned in size, and by 1919 had over 500,000 men under arms. Many of these men served under hastily promoted commanders, or were recruited wholesale from bandit gangs. Existing Beiyang generals, elite graduates of the Baoding and Tianjin military academies, took on increasingly political roles, becoming ministers, even military governors, and forming broad networks of power. As a result, the word Beiyang came to describe northern Beijing-based governments in general, and warlord came to describe virtually any prominent military figure, from national leaders to local commanders to bandit chiefs. By the end of the decade, the term Beiyang army ceased to have any real meaning at all. To many historians, this transitional period would mark the end of China as a centralized state and the beginning of the warlord era. Still, it was the core of the original Beiyang army that would come to dominate the following warlord era. Figures like Duan Qirui and Cao Kun used their ties within the army to expand their power far beyond it. As China continued to transform politically and economically, these ambitious leaders exploited the turbulent times to their personal advantage. Some tied themselves into the nation's rapidly modernizing economic institutions, banking, industry, and commerce. Others incorporated old Qing arsenals and cut deals with international arms traders. As the foreign concessions in Shanghai and Tianjin flourished, warlords tapped into their wealth and connections too. Weaker, more local leaders established vertical ties, pledging their loyalty to regional or national power brokers. As a result, powerful warlords became the hearts of patronage networks crossing military, political, and provincial boundaries. These loose alliances would later be referred to as the first warlord cliques. Although most warlords drew their main strength from military patronage, this wasn't always true. In 1917, Duan Qirui, formerly Yuan's Minister for War, established his own political party, the so-called Anfu Club. After a botched Manchu restorationist coup, Duan ordered new elections and discarded the provisional constitution, allowing his Anhui clique to sweep elections and become a bureaucratic powerhouse. Though he controlled few forces personally, he held onto virtually all legal levers of power, including the National Assembly, numerous provincial governments, and the cabinet, making him the most powerful figure in the early warlord era, sometimes called the Anhui era. Duan's rule would not go unchallenged. Hundreds of dismissed assemblymen and a significant part of the navy fled south, allowing Sun Yat-sen to declare a rival constitutional protection government in Gwangju and deny Duan's Anfu parliament uncontested legitimacy. This would crystallize the North-South division in China, but both governments would fall victim to endemic infighting and increasingly autonomous warlords. As a consequence, neither side would be able to unite the country for a decade. In Beijing, tensions grew within the Beiyang government itself. Where the Anhui clique had formed from the late Qing bureaucracy, the Jili emerged from its military academies. Feng Guojiang had been central to the instruction of the Beiyang Army's officer corps, and his former students became the core of the new Jili clique. However, Feng retired in 1918 and died not long after, leaving the faction to Cao Kun. Though a veteran commander, Cao did not command the same level of respect Feng once had. Unlike Feng, he had supported Yuan Shikai's enthronement, and he was known to be unscrupulous, even for a warlord. Initially, the Jili and Anhui cliques were broadly cooperative, with the former providing much of the Beiyang government's military backbone. However, Duan and Cao disagreed on national policy. To make matters worse, they quickly developed a personal rivalry born from political competition. As Duan attempted to draw the nation back together, Cao courted the peripheral warlords, those in the far south, northeast and west, whose power flourished in the absence of central government control. In response, Duan made deals with the Japanese to provide arms and funding for his troops, while Cao reached out to the Germans. With the Weltkrieg underway, the Germans had little to offer, but by 1918 the notion of Chinese reunification had become tied up in questions of nationalism, imperialism, and a simmering conflict that would later grow into the German-Japanese struggle in Asia. As many balked at Duan's Japanese ties, his reunification negotiations with the southern warlords stalled. To most, reunification was only possible if the government in Beijing cut ties with Japan and stopped expanding the Beiyang army. With much of Duan's power coming from exactly these sources, the demands were unacceptable. This stalemate would be broken only after the Weltkrieg's end, as leaked documents exposed the existence of secret, so-called Nishihara loans. These Japanese loans were made mainly to fund Duan's portion of the Beiyang army and reform the waning central government. With the nation divided and the Boxer indemnity still outstanding, Duan had struggled to balance the budget. However, the loan's terms proved deeply exploitative and highly unpopular. The Anhui clique would never recover from the Nishihara scandal. Less than a year later, the Jieli, backed by the nascent Fengqiang clique in Manchuria, shattered the Anhui as a significant force in Chinese politics. As the dust settled domestically, the Jieli emerged as the most powerful force in the north. However, the southern warlords remained untouched, and it was clear Chinese unity would not be achieved simply by ousting Duan from Beijing. In Europe, the Great War had come to an end. Against all odds, the German Empire now stood triumphant over a broken France and Britain. The 1919 Versailles Treaty forced France to cede her Indo-Chinese holdings to Germany, and British power east of India became severely compromised. This shift in the imperial balance of power would not bring peace to Asia, however. During the Versailles peace negotiations, Japan refused to return Qingdao and her new Pacific possessions to the battered Kaiserreich, despite British urging. Seeing Britain's desperation for peace as a betrayal, Japan refused to sign the Versailles Treaty altogether. In the eyes of the Japanese, it was not they who had lost the war, and Germany could not afford another protracted conflict in the East. This proved to be true. Even in victory, the Kaiserreich had been driven to the brink of national starvation, and it would take years for Berlin to consolidate her newly won possessions. Within months, Japan and Germany settled into an uneasy détente, but this mounting rivalry would not be soon forgotten by either side. Only in November 1921, after mediation by multiple parties, Japan reluctantly agreed to return Germany's colonies and end the Great War in Asia. In exchange, Tokyo received international recognition of its exclusive interests in Manchuria. This Qingdao Accord proved deeply unpopular in Japan. The Japanese public had long felt it had already secured a free hand in Manchuria after its 1905 victory over Russia. When the terms of the agreement were announced, riots broke out in Japanese urban centers, and the German-Japanese rivalry only intensified. Meanwhile, in Beijing, a new regime began to take shape. The Jieli clique's victory over the Anhui had not been achieved alone. Soon, Cao Kun found himself in the uncomfortable position of sharing power with two other ambitious figures, Jiang Zuolin, leader of the northeastern Fengqiang clique, and Wu Peifu, his own right hand. Wu was widely regarded as one of the most formidable generals of his time. His military prowess had played a central role in the Jieli triumph over Duan's Anhui clique. Leading from the front, Wu orchestrated a bold flanking maneuver during the decisive battle near Beijing, and his daring attack routed the Anhui forces in just 4 days. This triumph would propel Wu's name into living legend, and it wasn't long before he became known as the Jade Marshal, a nickname unique among Wu's warlord rivals. Unlike his peers, who began their careers as soldiers or bandits, Wu Peifu had been educated as a Confucian scholar, passing the grueling imperial civil service examination to become a Xia Yu Tai, or outstanding talent. Even more unusually, Wu eschewed direct ties with foreign powers. This nationalism and unique background, paired with military success, gave the Jade Marshal a special form of legitimacy among Chinese intellectuals, and in turn, politics at large. Since time immemorial, jade had represented purity, quality, and virtue, a mark of kings and emperors. To his supporters, Wu represented all these qualities and more. He was a gentleman, a philosopher general, and an echo of ages past, a Zhuge Liang or Liu Bei for a new era. To his enemies, Wu was something else altogether. His popular image and cultured background could not be ignored, but neither could his ruthless nature, nor his ties to the corrupt Cao Kun. Wu's warlord troops were just as violent and uncontrolled as most of his adversaries, and his deeply conservative views put him at odds with revolutionaries of almost all flavors. While Wu might seem to balk at his fellow warlords' abuses, he would never take substantive action to rein them in. He might seem outwardly upright and honorable, gracious and worldly, but in the end, Wu simply told everyone what they wanted to hear. Thus, to Wu's enemies, he was no honorable leader, but instead a scheming villain in the mold of Cao Cao, or a kind of Chinese Ludendorff.
There is an old saying, good iron is not made into nails. A good man does not become a soldier. Wu Peifu was a soldier, but they said his new government would be a good government of good men. It was to be open and transparent, public-minded and protective of personal liberties. There was to be a new constitution, inspired by the Western model and negotiations to reunite the country. Its ministers were to be educated elite, great engineers, scientists, and scholars, the best of them educated in Berlin or Oxford, Yale or Harvard. I can remember the excitement in the summer of 1922 as rumors spread across the broadsheets. For the first time in a decade, the future in China looked bright. Yet, there were two things Wu Peifu did not account for: the intractability of intellectuals and the power of jealousy. Wu and his good men could not agree beyond basic principles. Was there to be centralism or federalism? Self-governance or top-down rule? Everyone agreed there had to be a plan, but no plan could be agreed. Then, when elections were held in October of 1923, Cao Kun openly bribed the assembly, seeking to counter Wu's influence by paying them their long overdue wages. Cao won the presidency in a landslide. Wu was publicly outraged, but Cao was his superior, and real opposition would mean a disastrous civil war within the Zhili clique. In the end, the Jade Marshal did nothing. It is said that a good man is defined by his ability to stand firmly against evil forces. Perhaps we were fools to look for such men among soldiers. Good iron is not made into nails. A good man does not become a soldier.
Zhang Zuolin, the third member of the Uneasy Coalition in Beijing, could not have been more different. Zhang Zuolin's background was that of a pauper. Born in northeastern China, also known as Manchuria, Zhang spent his early years hunting and fishing, receiving little in the way of formal schooling. Later in life, when asked where he had studied, Zhang would answer, "The University of the Green Forest," a euphemism not unlike the School of Hard Knocks. By his teens, Zhang Zuolin had joined organized crime, and by 20 had become a soldier, fighting in the First Sino-Japanese War. When the war ended, Zhang turned to banditry, forming a small personal army and acquiring something of a Robin Hood-style reputation. When the Xinhai Revolution came and went, Zhang saw an opportunity to begin his political ascent. He climbed the political chaos like a ladder, seizing upon the Northeast's frontier isolation to pick and choose his battles. Despite his humble origins, Zhang Zuolin proved himself to be a savvy political operator. As the de facto ruler of Fengtian province, Zhang pledged fealty to Yuan Shikai's short-lived empire. This move earned him recognition from the self-proclaimed emperor, yet when Yuan's empire collapsed, Zhang was conspicuously absent from Beijing. By 1919, the bandit leader had extended his rule to cover over all three northeastern provinces, cementing his place as a dominant force in China's fractured landscape. Internally, Zhang's Fengtian regime offered stability. He forged deep connections among the region's leaders, its commerce guilds, business owners and gentry, leading by guided consensus instead of overbearing authority. Once endemic bandits were cowed or incorporated. Ambitious rivals were placated with generous bribes. Zhang did not want for money, after all. Manchuria's abundant coal, steel, and open frontiers proved bountiful. Zhang carefully negotiated partnerships with the Japanese, too, extracting maximum gain while never quite pushing himself into servitude. With Manchuria's favorable geography and the Fengtian army at his disposal, Zhang managed to turn the region into an indomitable fortress, accessible only through a few mountain passes and a single railway connection. This fortress also became a platform from which to project power southward into northern China, including Beijing. However, as strong as Jiang Zuolin's position might have appeared on a map, it remained compromised. While Wu Peifu and Cao Kun surrounded themselves with old military and bureaucratic allies, Jiang kept different company. His closest associates were his old bandit friends, born and bred like he was on the northeastern frontier. These scoundrels made for loyal partners, but they held little sway in political circles, and most had an insatiable appetite for luxury. Jiang Zuolin himself became notorious for purchasing the most expensive custom body car made in America, an armoured 1921 Packard Twin 6, featuring a full-size machine gun mounted in the passenger seat. Despite his vast wealth and efforts to shore up his reputation, the former bandit would never be recognized as one of China's social elite. The aftermath of the Jili-Anhui War would be the first time, but far from the only one, where Jiang's struggle for national legitimacy would turn into armed conflict. Within weeks, the Jili and Fengtian cliques began to compete over political appointments, budgets, and spheres of influence. By early 1922, Jiang Zuolin found himself politically outmaneuvered. With few other options, he deployed his troops in early April. Unlike the previous clashes, which lasted less than 10 days, this Jili-Fengtian war would involve multiple offensives and counter-offensives, consuming northern China for over 2 months. By midsummer, Wu's Jili forces had pushed the Fengtian back into their northeastern holdings and won the war. Now Wu Peifu had decisively bested his adversaries through flanking maneuvers and deceptive tactics twice. This second victory, though less sweeping than the last, affirmed Jili control over northern China and further elevated the Jade Marshal's growing prestige. While the power struggle between the Anhui, Jili, and Fengtian cliques would dominate much of Chinese politics during the 1920s, their actual control did not extend far beyond northern, eastern, and central China. Throughout the warlord era, the breakdown of governmental authority, limited network of railways, and sheer size of the country greatly isolated its various regions. Reaching China's far west, where there were no railways at all, could take over a month, and it was faster to travel from Beijing to Guangzhou by steamer than overland. Guangzhou in particular became the refuge of Sun Yat-sen's Kuomintang, or Nationalist Party of China. By the 1920s, Sun Yat-sen's vision for China had been expressed in the 3 principles of the people. These principles were nationalism, democracy, and the people's livelihood. Despite their ideological basis, the Kuomintang sometimes resembled an alliance of political factions rather than a single revolutionary party. In an effort to unify these divided groups, Sun made his southern government explicitly military and increasingly authoritarian in character. Eventually, the Chinese nationalists began to have much more in common with the other warlords than most would have liked to admit. Despite several setbacks, the Kuomintang slowly gathered new strength and courted new allies. Among them, Chen Zhongming, a minor warlord from Guangdong with whom Sun had long collaborated. Outwardly, Chen subscribed to many of the Kuomintang's ideas. Like Sun, he endorsed democratic ideals. Unlike him, however, Chen was adamant that reunification should come about peacefully, gradually, and in a federal manner. In his view, a violent military approach would only bring more devastation, instability, and civil war to China. By August 1921, Sun and Chen had successfully driven the remaining regional warlords out of Guangzhou and established a new nationalist government to rival the Jili regime in Beijing. Despite this military success, the relationship between Sun and Chen quickly began to deteriorate. Disregarding his lofty democratic ideals, Sun had begun operating the party as an unquestioned dictator. Chen, on the other hand, openly courted anarchists, syndicalists, and other federalists in eastern Guangdong. These conflicting visions reached a boiling point a year later. In 1922, the Jili made overtones to establish a government of national unity, one which would strongly favor Jili influence, of course. When the news reached southern China, the nationalists debated how to handle the issue. Rather than accept an unfavorable unification, Sun proposed launching an offensive against Beijing instead, a so-called Northern Expedition. Chen, ever the negotiator, refused to commit his forces to this offensive, especially after the failure of several such ventures the years before. Eventually, seeing the disagreement as irreconcilable, Chen Zhongming led an attempted coup against Sun and the KMT. When it failed, Chen and his men were expelled at first from the city, and later southern China as a whole. With this defeat in the south, and Wu Peifu refusing to entertain federalism in Beijing, Chen's dreams of a federal China seemed lost forever. Now, further than ever from achieving his revolutionary goals, Sun decided to court new allies and reorganize the party. He formed alliances with minor leftist organizations, such as the syndicalists and anarchists, many of whom were previously skeptical of, or even outright opposed to the KMT. More importantly, Sun deepened cooperation with the newly founded Commune of France. French funding would allow Sun to lessen his government's reliance on unscrupulous sources of revenue, such as opium and gambling. Meanwhile, the same funding would be used to found the Whampoa Military Academy. Just as Baoding graduates formed the backbone of the Northern Warlord Army's leadership, Whampoa would fulfill the same role for the KMT's National Revolutionary Army. Thus, the geopolitical dimensions of the warlord era broadened. As Germany backed the Jili clique and Japan backed Fan Qiang, the Kuomintang had become a partner for the syndicalist Commune of France. Although in Europe France seemed locked in a post-revolutionary stupor, it wouldn't be long before its foreign activities rang alarm bells in Berlin. The old imperial balance had been severely weakened by the chaos of the Weltkrieg, and the siren song of syndicalism grew ever louder. Indeed.
I arrived in China in the early 20s, perhaps. The party had only just begun leveraging our foreign influence for the revolution. France was still weakened from the Great War, and Germany loomed large across the border. What we found, both in London and in Shanghai, was a worker class subjugated to the most brutal oppression, ruled over by a petty oligarchy that had completely lost touch with the plight of the common man. I will concede, the oppression was more overt in China than it was in the British Isles. In the former lands of the Qing, the feudal class now wielded absolute power in the form of warlordism. Brutal regional conflicts defined the politics of the region. A never-ending cycle of civil war and bloodshed. The victim, as always, was the common man. The peasant and the worker bore the brunt of this violence. But the Kuomintang, yes. Among all the factions, theirs was the closest to a European political movement. It was not a workers' revolution in a way we Europeans would understand it. No. China is infinitely more complex, more ancient, more storied. But what made Sun special was a deeply rooted care for the people. We were not ideological allies in the traditional sense, but us both, syndicalists and nationalists, were victims of the imperial establishment and the insatiable corruption of the owner class. For China and for Sun Yat-sen, class struggle was the struggle against the foreign empires. First among them, of course, were the perfidious Japanese and Germans. It shames me deeply that France, too, once engaged in these underhanded colonial tactics. But there was a new age coming. This time, we could be a force for good in China. I spent many nights talking with Sun Yat-sen and other leaders of the nationalist movement. Those summer days in Guangzhou. Even as dark as China's days looked back then, it was clear to me that a new Chinese nation was on the rise.
Meanwhile, warlord politics continued apace in Beijing. By August 1924, rumors spread that the Jade Marshal was on the cusp of invading Manchuria in a bid to reunite China. In response, Feng Qiang, the KMT, and remnants of the Anhui clique entered into a tripartite coalition against the Jili. Later, when a Jili governor attempted to intimidate one of the few remaining Anhui warlords into ceding Shanghai, the pact was triggered. Both the Japanese-backed, vengeful Feng Qian and the French-backed Kuomintang pledged to defend the Anhui warlord from Jili aggression. On September 13, 1924, Feng Qiang leader Jiang Zuolin denounced the Jili government and formally declared war, beginning the Second Jili-Feng Qiang War. 250,000 troops, supported by light tanks and up to 300 aircraft, tried to break out of Manchuria once more. Despite the expansion and modernization of the Feng Qiang army, Jili defenses proved formidable. A grinding trench war slowly spread along the Great Wall and through the mountain passes. With Wu Peifu's armies tied up in a ferocious defense effort in the north, Jili domains around Shanghai found themselves increasingly autonomous. Left to their own devices, these domains rallied around the ambitious Sun Chuanfang, a protege of the Jade Marshal himself. Known as the Smiling Tiger, Sun profiled himself as a good-natured and honest warlord, unlike so many two-faced and servile Chinese politicians. Despite these outward pretensions, Sun was also known for his ruthlessness and unpredictable behavior. As the Smiling Tiger gained more and more power in the provinces around Nanjing, the Jili clique began experiencing what would eventually become an internal north-south divide. Meanwhile, despite the supposed alliance between the KMT and Feng Qiang, Kuomintang support in the war never materialized. With Feng Qian forces unable to advance in the north, it appeared the Jili might win the war through sheer exhaustion. But, before events could turn in the Jade Marshal's favor, he found himself caught in the crosshairs of an elaborate and mysterious plot. The plot would originate from one of his direct subordinates, the high-ranking general Feng Yuxiang. Feng was better known as the Christian warlord, for his religious zeal and focus on discipline. Although previously declaring himself a sworn blood brother to Wu Peifu, Feng had come to quietly resent his superior. Wu's restrictive leadership, a demotion the year before, and Feng's Kuomintang sympathies made him the perfect candidate to cripple the Jili from within. Allegedly following a massive Japanese bribe, Feng made his play for power. On October 23, 1924, thousands of troops under the Christian warlord reversed course and entered the Forbidden City in Beijing. The turncoats placed Jili President Cao Kun under house arrest and expelled the long-deposed Qing Emperor Pu Yi, still holed up in the old palace. Feng Yuxiang then declared himself leader of the Kuominjun, or National People's Army. By the time Wu Peifu could be warned of the putsch, it was already too late. With the government seized and an entire army in his rear, Wu's war effort suddenly found itself on the verge of collapse. Feng Qian generals used the chaos in the capital to launch a devastating offensive east of Beijing. Here, the Feng Qian army would deploy some of its most ruthless commanders. Entering the fray, Jiang Zongchang, the dog-meat general, inflicted a decisive defeat on the Jade Marshal near Tianjin. Now on the run, Wu Peifu prepared to retreat all the way back to Henan and reorganize. Unfortunately for Wu, his path of retreat would pass near the territory of warlord Yan Xishan of the Shanxi clique. The opportunistic Yan, who had remained neutral throughout most of the warlord era, used the opportunity to seize the railway route south. In a decisive battle, Yan cut off Wu's path of retreat. With just 2,000 loyalists remaining, Wu fled by sea to Wuhan. The Jade Marshal, once expected to unify China, had fallen. Although the Jili-Feng Qiang War had ended in the north, fighting continued for some time in the east. Jiang Zongchang moved south towards Shanghai, engaging Jili-aligned Sun Chuanfang. Both sides fought one another to a bloody stalemate, and a truce was signed by late April 1925. Sun consolidated his control over southeastern China, while Shanghai would be split between himself and Jiang Zongchang. For his merits in the war, the dog-meat general would be rewarded with the military governorship of Shandong. Even among China's many colorful warlords, Jiang Zongchang was a special case. Notoriously, Jiang's stewardship of Shandong quickly transformed an already struggling province into a true hive of scum and villainy. Jiang Zongchang in many ways represented the worst of China's warlords and the full depths to which the country had fallen by the mid-1920s. The general, awarded political positions mainly for his military prowess, did not even bother with the pretense of being a politician. The dog-meat general richly rewarded his subordinates with government coin, while enforcing his often arbitrary laws at gunpoint. Jiang himself would become a figure of almost folkloric irreverence, the archetypal warlord, eschewing the affairs of state for drinking, gambling, and carousing in Shanghai, all while his province spiraled into unimaginable depths of chaos and corruption.
Oh yes, I see that look in your face. You think you can judge me, outsider? Call me a bandit, an outlaw, scoundrel? What do you know of my life? Once, I was a poor and honest man. I worked on my father's farm near Beijing. Our life was simple, hard but honest. Each season, we would be outside in the field for 14 hours every day, doing backbreaking work in the blazing summer heat and winter snows. We scraped by, but barely. First, it was the Qing who came for our grain. To support the emperor, they said. And soldiers came and took our harvest. We complied, of course. We were loyal subjects, after all. Then the floods came, and then droughts. Our fields withered, my father became sick, food, once plentiful, had become scarce. In Beijing, the Qing emperor had abdicated, they told me, and we were now all servants of a Chinese republic, free and independent. Then the Anhui came and demanded our grain once more, and soldiers came and took our harvest. We complied, of course. We were loyal subjects, after all. My father's health worsened. We rice farmers now did not have enough to eat. In Beijing, they told me the despicable Anhui were defeated. The false republic had fallen, but the Zhili will show us the way forward. Then the Zhili came and demanded our grain once more. And soldiers came and took our harvest. We complied, of course. We were good citizens, after all. Father died that winter. In Beijing, they told me the corrupt Zhili clique has been thwarted. When the Kuominjun came, there was no grain left to demand. Frustrated, they burned down our family farm instead. When I protested, they beat me and left me for dead. When the bandits found me, I tried to run away at first. We were loyal subjects, after all. But the bandits treated me better than any government ever had. They told me no pretensions about the politics of Beijing. There is no law in China, they said, but the law of the strong. They were Jiang Zongcheng's men, dogs of the dog-meat general. They did as they wanted, when were they pleased, and took what they needed. For that, they said, they were called outlaws. They offered me to join them, to roam free from the dictates of false government, free from the shackles of civilized society. I had but one condition. Later that month, we attacked the Kuominjun garrison. Once inside, we found their wealth hidden in the basement. Gold, grain, supplies, enough to feed 12 villages. We took it all and gave it back to the farmers. They celebrated us, for bandits have given them the justice that the government in Beijing never would. What was taken from the people, we returned to the people. We were loyal subjects, after all.
With the Northern Geely's defeat in late 1924, hope blossomed that the warlord era might finally be nearing its end. Jiang Zuolin, still lacking political capital and forced to compromise with Feng Yuxiang's Guominjun, convened a national reunification conference in Beijing. Feng was particularly sympathetic to the Kuomintang, and for the first time ever, Sun Yat-sen travelled to Beijing to attend. However, before any agreement could be reached, the venerated revolutionary succumbed to cancer, aged just 58. Sun Yat-sen's untimely death threw a wrench into the ongoing negotiations in Beijing, and the nationalists began to rapidly descend into a succession crisis. The Kuomintang fractured into three major factions, each rallying around a different leader. Wang Jingwei emerged as the head of the leftist camp, advocating for a continued alliance with the French Communards, believing their support was essential for the party's success and survival. Opposing him on the right was Hu Hanmin, whose faction, wary of leftist influence, had largely withdrawn from Guangzhou, seeking safer strongholds in Shanghai and Beijing. Between them stood Chiang Kai-shek, leading the military center of the party. A pragmatist, Jiang sought to balance both sides while focusing on a singular goal, the military build-up necessary for a northern expedition. He carefully maneuvered between the factions, consolidating power while avoiding an outright split, at least for the time being. The months following Sun's death were marred by turbulence and bloodshed. Political assassinations and violent clashes plagued the party's ranks, with figures like Liao Zhongkai narrowly escaping attempts on their lives. The growing tensions finally came to a head at the party's fourth assembly, where the fragile unity of the Kuomintang shattered entirely. The confrontation between Wang and Hu proved decisive, driving an irreparable wedge between the left and right, and leaving the party divided. With the KMT unable to achieve even internal unity, national reunification with Beijing was now out of the question. While the Kuomintang fought internally, another distant revolution would soon impact China just as much as its own internal politics. By 1925, wildcat labour strikes and clashes in faraway Britain had escalated into a full-scale syndicalist revolution. Colonial governors, effectively abandoned by the waning British Empire, eyed London with trepidation, and the Royal Navy began a chaotic retreat back to Europe to support the Home Isles. Thousands fled Britain to Canada, and what forces could be withdrawn to assist the evacuation effort were recalled. In the colonies, fears of revolution spread like wildfire. With the British Raj already in disarray, the colonial constabulary's once iconic Sikhs had either been recalled, disbanded, or stood down. Police forces in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaya were left critically undermanned. Matters in China were made all the worse when fears of a possible syndicalist uprising in Australia, inflamed by the still infamous Melbourne riots, triggered the recall of most British forces in China. Excluding local auxiliaries, remaining British leadership, and personal security, Britain's concessions and territories were left poorly policed and virtually undefended by midsummer 1925. As British authority in China wavered, tensions in Shanghai began to spread out of control. On May 30th, a peaceful demonstration, led by students from the left-wing Shanghai University, turned violent. Overstretched colonial police, in their attempt to disperse the crowd, panicked and opened fire, killing over 50 people. This Shanghai massacre sent shockwaves across China, igniting an anti-colonial movement named after the event. This so-called May 30th movement spread from city to city at breakneck speed. Strikes and boycotts sprang up around China like wildfire, bringing foreign economic interests to a halt and shaking the foundations of European colonial control. 23 days later, thousands of anti-imperialist protesters attempted to seize a joint British-German concession in Guangzhou, only to be met with bullets. Dozens of civilians died in this Shaki massacre, alongside over 150 wounded. Boycotts and strikes rocked the major coastal cities, and the Kuomintang were all too quick to capitalize on the propaganda opportunity. By June, civil war had swept across the British Home Isles, and it was clear Britain's concessions would receive no further assistance from London, Canberra, or Singapore. This precarious situation was felt most keenly in Hong Kong, which had been completely destabilized by the rapid succession of crises. Then, in July, Kuomintang leadership declared their intent to retake the Crown colony. With KMT forces mere miles away in Guangzhou and anarchy looming, acting governor Claud Severn had to choose: either risk losing Hong Kong or appeal for aid from the nearby German Guangzhouwan garrison. Severn felt he could not go to the United States. They were, after all, further away, and considered dangerously non-committal after their neutrality in the Great War. His decision, the infamous Severn Note, would rewrite the course of history. Choosing race over national identity, Severn petitioned the German Governor-General of Indochina for help. Effectively, Severn was offering Britain's vast Chinese holdings to the Germans on a silver platter. Berlin complied eagerly, and not long after, 3,000 German troops landed in Hong Kong. While anti-foreign revolts would continue for some time, a KMT invasion was now out of the question. After securing Hong Kong, the government in Berlin saw an opportunity for even further gains, and offered protection to all of Britain's Chinese concessions. In response, Japan and the United States, the other remaining powers in East Asia, made the same guarantees. Over the following weeks, all three countries rushed to secure as much British territory as they could hold, a period of intense competition later known as the Shanghai Scramble. This new colonial struggle reignited years of German-Japanese tensions. As Tokyo and Berlin consolidated their new holdings in Asia, their troops faced one another in a series of tense standoffs. While civilian life went on largely as usual, British concessions across China suddenly found themselves divided by walls of sandbags, manned by steely-eyed German, Japanese, and American Marines. This state of affairs would last several years. Even as the great powers competed over China's concessions, its fragile governing coalition in Beijing began to collapse. By November 1925, Jiang Zuolin and Feng Yuxiang were at war. Soon the weaker Feng had been forced to the northwestern periphery, while to the east near Nanjing, Jiang Zhongchang and Sun Chuanfang came to blows over Shanghai. Sun Chuanfang's decisive victory over the dog-meat general gave the Smiling Tiger enough political capital to declare a new League of 5 provinces in Nanjing. Now ruling most of eastern China, including some of China's richest provinces, Sun Chuanfang had effectively supplanted Wu Peifu as de facto head of the Jili clique. While this balance of power would prove temporary, it signalled an end to any pretense of Jili unity. Going forward, there would be 2 Jili cliques, one led by Wu Peifu and Cao Kun, and another led by Sun, the Smiling Tiger. With the disgraced Wu Peifu largely contained in central China, Jiang Zuolin's Feng Tian clique now exercised total control over the Beijing government. Unfortunately for Jiang, this government was a far cry from the powerful central authority it had been during the time of Yuan Shikai. Continually dissolved, reconvened, bribed, and manipulated, the National Assembly had lost any semblance of legitimacy. All 3 of the nation's constitutions, from 1912 to 1923, had been trampled on and ignored. Meanwhile, the man at the helm, Jiang Zuolin, never escaped his unfavourable reputation. In the eyes of the intellectual class, Jiang was a bandit who had stolen the Republic, a prize he could never hold on to for long. Matters were no better economically. With 2 major wars in under 2 years, the shock of the British collapse, and ongoing strikes in China's major ports, the outlook was dire. Many schools, shuttered during the war due to the fighting and lack of funds, failed to reopen. All across the north, levees and other infrastructure, now chronically underfunded and maintained only by local patchwork, had begun to collapse. When these failed, the consequences were often disastrous, and unchecked flooding continued to claim hundreds of thousands of lives. Perhaps worst of all were the bandits. While highway robbery had been a problem for centuries, dissatisfied or demilitarized soldiers frequently turned to banditry. Compared by peasants to forces of nature, these small armies would raid and pillage even fortified market towns, levelling everything in their path. When these men were inevitably reabsorbed by one warlord army or another, their old habits were rarely left far behind. Facing the realities of a divided nation, Jiang's Wuolin had few remedies to offer. However, in Guangdong, the Kuomintang presented an ideological alternative. The KMT's 3 principles of nationalism, democracy, and welfare proved tantalizing prospects for millions. To many, the white sun became a rallying symbol for justice, hope, and prosperity. Now the situation seemed perfect for the Kuomintang's latest and long-planned northern expedition. They prepared for a sweeping conquest, dreamt of by the late Sun Yat-sen, ridding China of warlordism and uniting the entirety of the country under a single government. On July the 9th, 1926, General Chiang Kai-shek addressed his 100,000-strong revolutionary vanguard in Guangzhou. Trained by French officers in the ways of Western warfare and armed with modern weapons, the National Revolutionary Army had become a formidable fighting force. Within a week, Chiang's armies overwhelmed Jili-aligned forces in Henan and reached the provincial capital, Changsha. Their true target, however, was Wuhan. The Tri-City area, including one of China's largest arsenals and the birthplace of the Xinhai Revolution, represented both a strategic and political stepping stone to the Northern Expedition's goals. An overstretched Wu, still fighting Guominjun remains in the north, rushed south, hoping to hold the city against the revolutionaries. Unbeknownst to the Kuomintang, however, a new power was about to enter the war. Some time earlier, League warlords had entered secret negotiations with the German Empire to intervene on their behalf. Tragically, the Kuomintang's northern expedition was now not marching towards victory, but towards an inevitable trap. Berlin had quietly begun pulling the strings, intending to deploy their own vision for the future of China. At Wuhan and Jinhua, then, the future of China would be decided. Could the Kuomintang restore the ideals of a Chinese republic, or would the Kaiserreich, stretching ever further after the collapse of rivaling Britain, finally subject China to a new imperial order? Or perhaps even a restoration of the Qing Emperor?
Before we wrap up today, we've got to give another shout out to our sponsor, EasyRed 2 Shanghai Nanking. If you love classic World War II shooters like Medal of Honor Allied Assault, Day of Defeat, or Battlefield 1942, you're going to love EasyRed 2. This is an expansive indie shooter that's been continuously updated by a passionate dev team for years now. I received a bunch of keys for the team and played the game extensively during the production of KR-Doc 9, and I was blown away. The number of playable vehicles, factions, and aircraft is staggering, and the gameplay is smooth, intense, and incredibly fun. EasyRed 2 perfectly captures the massive scale of historical World War II battles, making you feel like just another soldier on the beaches of Normandy, the ruins of Stalingrad, or the streets of Shanghai. This is exactly the kind of scrappy, passionate developer team we love working with at the Kaiserreich Collective. So I couldn't be happier to sign them on as sponsor and have them as a part of this video. Now, will you do your part? Go check out EasyRed 2 on Steam with over 4,000 very positive reviews. This is hands down the best $9 you'll ever spend, and that is a promise. Alright, there we are. We are 100% back. Thank you all for watching that KR-Doc 9 episode. We are going to move this into the Q&A segment of this live stream, which is basically Just chatting with Day, the editor, who I have with me, the editor and director of Kaiserreich Documentary. Day, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It was very nice to see the documentary released.
Well? I think. Oh, we're actually still Zhang Zuolin and Wu Peifu are still equal.
They are. Are they still tied? I guess that's the kind of the problem in the Warlord era, that no one seems to be able to make up their mind on who should be unifying.
We have a beer bet going, so I owe him a beer. If so, you all have to vote Wu Peifu, and you don't have a lot of choice because as chairman of this collective, I have many ways to.
If you all vote for Zhang Zuolin, I will make sure Vincent drinks a terrible Dutch beer.
Oh no, the Heineken stuff, yeah. Oh,
not the good Dutch beer, the bad Dutch beer.
Worst. No. So for Q&A, the first question that I am seeing is indeed, when is the second part of this documentary series coming? That is next week, so it is the 30th. The trailer you can see is already on the channel. That is Fall of the Kuomintang, will release coming Thursday, and the full episode does release on Sunday around this time. So we are not going to do a live stream next week, we're just going to do live chat. But just as right now we are giving away Easy Red 2 Steam keys via prize question, which brings me to, and I need to remember, I'm trying to get through all 5. Give me a minute there, I'm trying to work my way through the script.
Yeah, take your time, that's fine. I've got the answers ready here.
We're professionals.
We're totally professionals.
We have a schedule. We have a schedule to keep through, gentlemen. No, so the next prize question for that Easy Red 2 giveaway, so as you know, you have to email it to me at kaiserreich.cinema.contest@gmail.com, which is the contest email. I'll put it in live chat as well. The question specifically is, this time it's a Kaiserreich lore question, which is, can you give me the names of the 3 most powerful warlords at the end of this part of the documentary? So the 3 main players that we are seeing in China right now, and also that have been the focus of this first part of the documentary episode. The person to answer this prize question first, email it to me. You have to email it, so don't answer in live chat. That does nothing.
Don't put it in chat.
Don't put it in chat. You have to send it to kaiserreich@cinema.contest@gmail.com. I think I literally just opened this today. I need to check what the actual.
We're gonna do it. If you put it in chat, you owe us a copy of the game.
Yeah.
We're gonna charge you.
A terrible
and a beer.
beer.
And a beer too.
No, it is kaiserreich@cinema.contest@gmail.com. So Earl Verlorum is opening this Q&A with the question of why Severn is portrayed as the governor of Hong Kong. So I asked this, Earl, to Gabriel, but he is not able to make the live stream. He was not able to answer your question in time. Unfortunately, he works on the weekend, so he has to do a shift. His entire Q&A segment that we did, we actually pre-taped, so we're about to run it, but it is a pre-taped segment that we recorded during the week. We weren't able to get your question in, but let it put that question on the main release, the KISMAN release, which goes live right after this live stream probably, and I'll make sure to answer you there in a YouTube comment so I can get back to Gabriel in the coming week. Just a second for a drink here. Alright, so let's start the Q&A part of this documentary, David.
Yes.
With you. You are DavidDH, or Day the editor, and my first question to you was, just a second. So, my brother, let's lean back for a minute, crack open an Albert Heijn energy drink, and say, holy hell, what a project this has been.
I just love that I can see you read. You get to read the question. I'm also reading, but
I absolutely did not study lines for this live stream. I wrote it on 2 days ago, and I'm like, I was like, okay, we'll go in with the script. We'll just read it.
Oh man, it's been such a massive challenge to get this one out. It's been. I think it's been like 2 years to get this going, which I don't think I've ever worked on a project quite as big as this one. I don't think I've ever bothered my friends as much talking about niche China lore.
I do think it's been at least 1.5 years. I'm not sure 2 years, but I know that the writing stage for Kaiserreich Documentary 9 and 10 it started quite early, and the script was significantly longer before we did end up going into production with the short.
And it also went through quite a few revisions because we couldn't really make up where we wanted to demarcate the script, where we wanted to start it, end it, what to include, what not to include. But yeah, still, it's really, really cool to finally see it out there, and also for viewers to enjoy. That's really, really nice.
Yeah, so about the original script for Kaiserreich Documentary 9, so we opened with, we were going to do, basically a documentary of the Chinese Civil War.
Yes.
So we began writing, that was, who was in the writing room? That was you, David, that was Gabriel, who is Gabriel Matsakis, who is Flamefang, former 2019 China Rework lead, so he was one of the main driving forces between that 2019 China Rework. Was also lead writer on this project. So what ended up happening is we had a script which went all the way. I think we did break it down in word count, and we were like, this is 4 hours of documentary. Like, there's no way.
Yeah, it was way too long.
Yeah, the 2-hour documentary is like the compromise short solution.
So in the original script, we even when we were discussing all the warlords and what was happening, so we were basically going province by province, and you might have noticed that we mostly stuck to the eastern seaboard and the super big factions.
Yeah, there's like Xinjiang is just not covered at all. Like
yes, and I think the one that really broke me was Sichuan, which it's shown in the little overview clips as one warlord clique, but it really wasn't. It was a bunch of little ones that were all fighting, and there wasn't a single Sichuan clique, because it's got this perfect hellish geography where it's both mountain and jungle, which means it's like impossible to control. So
the old Hearts of Iron 2 veterans will know, like jungle, mountain, the craziest terrain. It's probably not
it's horrible
as well.
It's horrible, and I think going there and trying to outline exactly what was happening in each province became impossible to follow. Like, we were already struggling in the writers' room to really ascertain what's going on, who is who, and what's happening in every single province, how it impacts each other. And we kind of concluded, if we can't really follow it, we can't reasonably expect our audiences to follow it.
Yeah, so as Millennium Sword in live chat says, Sichuan could be its own series on its own.
It really could, yeah.
This is the argument that Gabriel makes when we go to his Q&A section. Later on, he says, the only way to do the entirety of a Chinese Civil War or is to make it its own series, like a full documentary.
We would probably need to start an entirely new channel.
It's a new channel. It is like literally the China Reich.
It will just be Kaiserreich China.
You know that where they put that meme where it's like, here's your Kaiserreich lore book and here's your like Chinese Civil War lore book, which is like 10 times the size. No, I think what we ended up with these 2 hours is a good compromise. So we have Romance of the Warlord, then we have what we call Black Eagle White Sun, which is the second part, releasing next week on Sunday. I also like that it's a double feature, so we're releasing them 2 back to back. Gives a little bit of breathing room for us as well to manage the whole schedule, because it's a lot of work just putting the video out there, doing the social media posts. Like, I spend a lot of time, people think that I spend a lot of time drawing. Unfortunately, like, most of my time is just admin and budgeting and fundraising and this and that. Someone suggests to call the channel the Kaiserreich Cinematic Wang Dimao Dianji.
Your pronunciation was miraculous on that one.
Was it good? I don't know. Like,
I don't know. It sounded very convincing.
No. It's probably terrible. I've never.
Yeah, we speak the same mother tongue, so we probably don't know any Chinese.
Yeah, no, never in my life have I spoken Chinese or done anything.
I'm probably butchering 90% of the things I say.
I know Gabriel does a convincing Chinese. Obviously, he did his whole doctorate thesis on the Chinese Civil War, so he's very knowledgeable in that area. So Simak asks if it was planned to release the documentary together with the China Rework, the new one. No, that is entirely coincidental. As I said, the documentary project specifically, this one started at least, I think you said 2 years. I think, like 16, 18-ish months before when we started writing. There's just no way when we start. Yeah, it's almost 2 years. But when we start writing, there's like no way to say. That's why we don't really give release dates. because it's so complicated and there's so much like moving parts to it, like so many actors, a lot of art, custom art that we're making for the project as well. It's really hard to say when something will release, which is why, you know, especially after these 2 hours of documentary, we're doing some shorter videos. We're gonna take a quick breather from this kind of stuff because this is really intense, you know.
I think it's also important to give an update on the election poll. Currently, Zhang Zhuolin and Wu Peifu are still tied. Both with 42% and Sun Chuanfang with 15%, meaning I'm going to get a quality Belgian beer and you're going to get a terrible Dutch beer.
Yeah, so we're gonna split the difference. Everyone gets a beer. Problem is, the Dutch beer is very terrible. The Belgian beer will be good, so it's not really a victory.
Maybe we should just I don't know, import an American beer, so you know it's bad.
Yeah.
Sorry, chat.
In Raleigh,
harsh but truthful.
When I used to work in Raleigh, I don't have that much experience with the US, but I worked in Raleigh, and so I was mostly in sort of the northern part of Southern America. And I know back then, this was pre-COVID, or maybe at the start of COVID, I don't remember. IPAs were a huge thing in Raleigh, so there was like every few days we would have a drink with the colleagues, and we would always go to the special microbrewery and like a different one. Like every time I was there, different breweries like that. Super crazy. There were so many, and the beers were actually really good. It was, you know, special microbrew. It's not something that, I mean, it probably exists in our countries, but we're more about the brands, right? If we're honest.
That's very true. Also, Wu Peifu does seem to be taking a small lead again. It's currently at 44%, falling 3% over Zhang Zhuolin.
Natural radiant charisma.
We will have to see. We will have to see what happens.
No,
it's very close.
Let's go to editing questions, David.
Yes, let's do that.
So here, what I wrote is, so each documentary episode, what you do is you introduce a few new After Effects compositions and motion graphics templates. I'm gonna try and pull up some examples from our project folder. I'll pull it from After Effects. Let's say Parliament, for example. I see you are not putting your renders in. I see you're not putting your renders in AMI folder, but you're putting them in a separate renders folder.
On this one, I am. Yeah, I'm not really sure why, but that's just gonna happen. Do make sure you're getting one. You're getting one which hasn't shown up yet.
I love it.
Okay, yeah, you do when it has shown up.
So what I'm showing full screen is the amount of the custom motion graphics that we make, which often feature, you know, territory, zones of control, stuff like that. So in KIRDoc9 specifically, David, you extend this with the new regional battle maps and chapter introductions.
Right.
So the first one shows troop and political leader movements on a more tactical level. The second one recaps the ever-shifting territorial control in China. Then more specifically at the start of a chapter, and I think I have a couple of them here. Yeah, here's like the start of Fall of the Qing that I am running. So can you elaborate a bit on why you chose these two types of animations for China's civil war?
Yeah, absolutely. So I chose a bunch of different map formats because they serve a pretty different purpose. Mm-hmm. This one that's on screen right now is more to kind of give a sense of place whereabout China is going. It can be pretty frantic, keeping track of all the warlords, all the names, all the factions. And even like how chaotic is China at this particular moment. So I figured it would be nice to kind of ground the lore every few minutes in between chapters to refocus where is China, what's happening, who controls what, so people have a sense of what exactly it is, and it's just not just all floating information. And then the new comps. I'm not sure if you want to pull those up at this very moment. I think they're in maps.
Get a playlist going, yeah.
Do make sure you're not. You shouldn't show that one. That's in the second part. That's exclusive. It's very exclusive information. It's not to be revealed yet.
It's Jade Marshall Dragon Throne from 27. But I mean, the point stands, you know.
The point stands. Right. So there's also like the more detailed compositions which showed up, I think, towards the end, and they're going to show up a lot more in the second part, which are the exact troop movements, and you see the generals and the warlords themselves in charge of armies and bumping into each other, trying to defeat each other.
Yeah.
What I wanted to do was, I feel like the overview maps didn't really fit to get the meat of the drama into the documentary. The weird thing about China is that the warlords have this miraculous ability to manifest an army anywhere. They can randomly show up behind you or lay siege to your capital. And if you do it with regular map comps, it didn't really seem very interesting to me. So I wanted to show a teeny tiny bit of movement. That's actually a very bad example because that one's more on the older side, but that's fine. So I went back and I went looking into some of the earlier compositions, and I believe it was in the first or the second documentary there was this battle near Paris in the French Civil War, it's in the Nicholas Takeover.
Yeah, that's when we first did this specific type of.
Yeah, so like the map went into negative, and then there were these overlays, and I thought that was a very nice idea to visualize how a battle was happening.
Yeah. So here we have Wu Peifu beating Fang Shen reserves.
Yes.
Material. Yeah.
Yes, so that will be happening eventually. So as you can see, it's much more zoomed in. And the colors are always consistent. So brown is always Fangxian, green is always Northern Jili.
Yeah.
Yes. To give more sense of place. And I also was kind of inspired by how Oversimplified does it. If you see these Oversimplified vids, units often show up on way more nicely drawn maps. But you can see the movement and the drama in it. I wanted to bring to the Kaiserreich documentary, so that's the reason that I went for these maps.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think specifically for the Chinese Civil War also, what you end up getting is you get much more of a style of warfare which is centered around specific leaders in their regiment, their army. You know, as you see, manifesting behind enemy lines, and the fronts are very porous because it is a civil war. So this is
and there's also like a few particular connections are very important, like
the railways,
and exactly the exact railroad crossings, a few major strategic passes, like the Shanghai Pass in the north, which separates the northeast of China from Beijing. Yes, and also in the second point, there's this pass called the Yuling Pass, which is pretty much where the Northern Expedition needs to go through to reach places like Shanghai.
With the Tri-City area.
No, it's more east.
Oh yeah,
but so I don't really want to spoil what happens there, but it's pretty important, and I wanted to highlight on a map whereabout the Yuling Pass would be and why it matters.
Yeah, well, I mean, not to spoil anything, but the trailer is called Fall of the Kuomintang.
Yeah, but I don't want to spoil how it happens.
Okay. Technically, it's not the fall of the Kuomintang because you can play.
Yeah, but you know, if you go to a movie like The Death of Stalin, you know he's going to die, but you still want to know how.
Yeah, okay, fair. No, so that is map animations. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about these footage, like the very good historical footage that you found for this documentary, specifically, like where does it come from?
Yes,
this was a very difficult subject.
It is. There was, believe it or not, it's very difficult or pretty tricky to find reliable and quality footage of China during the 1920s. It's hardly surprising. So, of course, a lot of footage isn't from that time period. I tried relying on newsreels, travelogues, old documentaries, stuff like that, to have the more reliable footage. So for a lot of these shots, I cut Chiang Kai-shek or Mao Zedong. I cut them out because they were on the right. They were like literally, probably if you play the footage clip in its actual context, the next frame would probably be a massive photograph or a poster of either Mao or Chiang. But I can't show that because they're not relevant to the story at this point in time, and not in the capacity in which they were in real life. Chiang Kai-shek is kind of, but we'll deal more with him in the next episode. And there are, of course, a few historical movies that I used, and I tried to kind of reframe them in by messing up the footage a little bit, putting on a few overlays, messing up the color balancing to seem a little bit older. And pass them as accurate historical footage.
Yeah, so we have a nice little effect stack that we made to take like
modern
footage.
Yeah, it's literally called F up movie footage.
Yeah, screw up movie footage.
And yes, so I just insert that effect over it, so it mirrors it and it screws up the darkness and lighting and stuff like that.
I think for Kaiserreich Cinema, the thing that we love doing is always going back to the projector, as our basis, with
yes.
like dusty old cinema feeling, with the red velvety chairs, that kind of feeling. So that's what we're looking for. I think it feels very authentic to the project,
Yeah, it's very nice, and it's also, I mean, the Kuomintang footage was generally the easiest to get because there was a lot of drama made around Sun Yat-sen and his life. Yeah. That was pretty easy to get, but getting footage of the Geely and the Kuomintang was near impossible. It was very difficult.
This is pretty far outside of the centers of the coast where you would probably have the most like modern cameras in the 1920s.
Yeah, there was one Russian documentary. I think it's like white Russian emigres who fled the Russian Civil War, and they were documenting the armies of Zhang Zuolin and the Fangtian armies. And
they
that was
fled
actually
the Russian Civil War to end up in the Chinese Civil War.
A lot of them did, yeah.
That doesn't sound like a great time, actually.
It probably wasn't, but it was. Case in point, the movie footage that I shot is very usable and it's very good, and also it has a lot of footage of Zhang Zhongqiang, especially. So like all the footage where you see him walk up to the camera. That's actually real footage.
Yeah.
I also see comments in chat about the high quality movie footage. That's very true. There's still a few tricks that I want to try more and use more, also to mess with the frame rate a bit more, because that did bother me as well in the final product, which I think there's still some room for improvement. I think it's already quite good because I try to limit it as much as possible, the movie footage. I only use it if I really ran out of options, but it can always be better, so I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, I think the movie footage really worked. We do end up using and billing this as a project which contains AI with a like YouTube synthetic content disclaimer, but all in all, there's.
Oh, I was laughing at someone in chat. If the mess up movie footage filter is available for others to use, I don't think that's possible.
We can send. You can actually export it's a Premiere effect stack. It's pretty simple.
Can we just give that actually?
Yeah, sure.
Because I'd be happy to share it.
The trick is to downsample your footage into oblivion.
Yeah, just put on every single effect that makes it look worse, but still presentable.
What they don't tell you to do, like in film school, like
absolutely
do not just
reverse film school.
Reverse film school. No, we have some AI footage as well, but I think mostly it's like filling in gaps. But I didn't end up opening with that disclaimer, and I think I'll do it in most episodes, because especially now we're moving into an era where we are altering things via synthetic means as well, and it shows historical figures doing things which maybe they haven't done. I think it's better to like just put that up front, even though the AI use is very light in this episode still.
I think we can go a bit further and say it's pretty much minimal.
It's pretty much minimal. I know.
So we did use it sporadically.
Yeah.
Only in places where they didn't really matter to the plot, but we were absolutely out of other options.
I think this shot that I'm showing made it into the episode. So this is not an actual shot. This is an AI shot, yeah. But it's generally what I like about AI is the generic, gap filler. I think we've had a conversation about this during our last week's meeting, I think, where I think I said like, I think this AI stuff, it can be mortar, but it can be the brick. It's like when you have a gap and you just can't fill it, that's when you put in like a stock footage or AI. When you
I suppose I'm a bit more hesitant when it comes to artificial intelligence. I'm not really doubting the final product, but it still feels a bit disingenuous to me sometimes.
Yeah.
And also because of sometimes environmental concerns, it takes quite a lot of power to generate these movie footages. I think using it very carefully and very limitedly, it's fine, but it shouldn't I think it shouldn't really become the meat of the entire thing, and so that's the best.
Yeah, so especially via AI, what I tell the crew is always like everyone has to find, what they feel about, the tools and try them out. And if you don't want to use it, you don't use it. It's not something you have to use. I think the one shot that really does haunt me, and it's the one I opened here, because this is a historical photo of, I want to say Sun Yat-sen, that we just put into an AI, and we were like, animate this photo, and it gives you this footage, and it actually like continues the story from a photo, and that's pretty nuts actually. And it's pretty good as well. I think the only way where you can really see its AI is the weird arm movement, sort of. If you look at this specific parts that I'm highlighting here for chat, you can see they have this weird ass twitch in their arms. It's kind of off-putting.
Yeah.
But it's still very impressive.
It is. So, it definitely is.
I think the Hong Kong, the guys carrying a box in a port, that one made it in as well. I don't remember where it is, but I'm pretty sure we.
Yeah, it is. It will show up. I know the footage you were talking about.
Yeah, I don't even know where it is anymore.
Yeah, that's true because I kind of ran out of generic city footage.
Yeah.
That one was a nice filler.
The generic filler footage I think is the most interesting, and that's something because it helps when we have a gap between two shots that we're quickly trying to bridge with something that's a little more generic.
So Vincent, will the live stream be uploaded? I know you said just a text answer, so I will also answer you in text.
Just a second. Sorry. Will the live stream be uploaded? Oh yeah, no, sure. This is recording live to YouTube. I'll just answer Simak. So after you end this live stream, it just stays on YouTube. It's always recording directly there. All right, let's move on to that next question. Oh, actually, this is the end for your questions. Is there anything you wanted to add here, David?
Ooh, I'm not really sure.
So we talked about footage choice and where you source the historical footage, the After Effects compositions. I know you're writing new projects now. Can you talk a little bit more about the stuff you're writing?
Hold on, we gotta answer in chat.
Yeah. The problem with the live stream is that you're both trying to do text chat.
Yes.
It's like being in two phone calls at once.
True. Yes. So right now I am working on the American Kingdoms documentary. So I'm not really involved there as a writer, more or less as an editor, and also trying to give more clear storyboard directions, more from a creative point of view, whereabouts, how we're going to visualize this.
Just to jump in there real quick, not as a writer yet, because I do have you tapped for AK.
That's right. Yes, I will be involved as a writer, but on the project that I'm currently working on, the scripts are already written, and honestly, as a writer, I would do the plots a disservice to add anything to them because they are perfect.
It's pretty cool.
They're very beautiful stories.
But I think especially for like the really hardcore in-depth stuff, that's when I tap you. Especially because, and I did not notice, but I know you mentioned this last year, you actually have a doctorate or a master's in the American Revolutionary War.
That's not entirely true. I have a history bachelor with a thesis in the American Civil War.
Close enough. so that also actually answers people asking what the next documentary will be. That will indeed be the Second American Civil War, and also so we're going back into some America content, especially with American Kingdoms, which is of course entirely new. On the Kaiserreich front, we'll have to check in with the developers of the mod to see where we are on their American Civil War rework, because we want to bring, when it's a Kaiserreich documentary, we want to try and bring the most recent lore that we have at the moment of writing. So it's always a snapshot of the lore in development.
Hey, Vincent, maybe you want to answer this message from 6th Infantry Division in chat?
Yeah, sure.
He's writing that he is planning on making a Kaiserreich into a book series, but it won't be based on or inspired by Hearthstone 4 or Kaiserreich Cinema. It's coming in the near future. What do you think about that?
Oh no, that's really.
I think it sounds pretty cool.
So about Kaiserreich books, you can write Kaiserreich books. Kaiserreich is a setting; it's an open setting. Timothy Wong has done one, by the way. So he sent me his manuscript. I think that was About a year and a half ago, which I read, and I gave him like some script writing notes, and I sent it back to him. And I know I would love to do something with it, but I told him like this, we can't produce this. It's the same problem as with China. It's like just too much content. You know, there's only so much script that we can actually put into a video because of the associated costs and the actors and everything with that. What I would love to do with Timothy Wong's book, which is about the Second American Civil War, incidentally, it was a detective noir story about an FBI agent who basically gets dropped into the middle of the start of the Second American Civil War in, I think, New York or Atlanta. I'm not sure where it was situated. But the opening scene there, I think, would be a really cool intro animatic for KR Doc 11, which will then be Second American Civil War. But more about that later. Just as a reminder, you can indeed write Kaiserreich books. That's totally open. So if you have no more questions, David, let's move on and talk to Flamefang. This is a pre-taped thing, so it's mostly a recording I'll play.
I'm good, but if in case anything pops up in chat as well, do feel free to ask. I'd be happy to answer.
I am going to have to open my phone, I think, because I cannot have my screen open because I don't have my dual monitor set up right now, which maybe is something that I should think of for future live streams. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open Gabriel's Q&A because we had several questions for him, and graciously he has answered them for us. So chat, let me know if you are getting this audio clean. Question 1. First off, Flame, can you introduce yourself to the community briefly? So most regulars will know us, of course, but I think it's always good to take it from the top for a live stream. What is your involvement with Kaiserreich and the Kaiserreich Documentary project?
Sure. I joined the project way back in early 2017, developed VincentDN, and led the 2019 China Rework, which really got the whole China Reich thing we see today moving. During that time, I began working with Vincent and the Kaiser Cat crew, mainly on the mod's first China-themed art, and I was fortunate enough to travel to PDXCon 2019 in Berlin, where I met up with everyone. In 2022, I began to step away from active KR development for various reasons, but I still play a role there and provide script writing and advice for the Kaiser Cat team. I've been involved in writing several of the other Kaiserreich documentary scripts, World of Kaiserreich episodes, and directed the Nights in Shanghai series. If you like China content, which I'm guessing you do since you're here, I recommend checking those out. They're very experimental and had almost no budget, especially the first one, but pretty unique in focus and scope.
We start the documentary very early on. This creates a unique flow in the documentary where we are actually seeing actual recorded history for much of the first part of the documentary. So Flame, can you elaborate why you felt this early historical long-tail start was chosen for KR Doc 9 and then explore the actual point of divergence in some more detail?
It's very rare to find neat beginnings and endings in history. Events run into one another and bleed together because at the end of the day, history is mostly cause and effect, no matter how abstract or detailed you get. There are reasonable arguments for several starting points, among them the Xinhai Revolution and the Second Zhili Fengtian War. The former was my original choice, allowing more time for post-POD events, but Vincent felt the review of ancient history as part of the KCC documentary style. The period between 1911 and 1918 is necessary, in my view, to introduce China as a character and explain the main formative years for the entire warlord system. Yuan Shikai set things up so they could come crashing down, and the rest flows from there. That then leads into the second half of the question, the actual point of divergence. Well, China doesn't have a single point of divergence because the outcome of the Great War had relatively minor immediate effects on China compared to, say, Europe. This event and the failure of the Northern Expedition make up the two primary PODs, but the latter is caused mainly by the German response to the Yangtze incident. Of course, the Germans might not have reacted that way were it not for the Shanghai Scramble, which was triggered by the Severn Note, itself triggered by the collapse of the British Empire. Then there's a failure to assassinate Liao Zhangkai, and so on. Remember what I said about neat beginnings and endings?
Question 3. So, speaking of points of divergence, can you talk a little bit as to the creative or historical inspirations that led to the China rework of 2019? Are there literary movie references being made here? Are they inspired by other stories, historical or fictional?
Well, to be clear, I inherited the broad outlines of the 2019 rework from the Kaiserreich for Darkest Hour team. So while I worked with several of them for a while, it's hard for me to say what might have influenced their decisions. As for my own work, it's mainly inspired by the real history of the region from the late 1800s to the early 1930s. I suppose there's probably some influence from my background in political science and international conflict analysis. We studied a fair number of crises and post-colonial conflicts, and both my undergrad and postgrad theses related to the Manchurian crisis and the Japanese colonial empire. But it's hard for me to point to anything specific as an influence.
Question 4. What was the most challenging part of making this documentary?
As the head of the 2019 China Rework, and as a scriptwriter, brevity. Went through about 40 edits on the script, not including an earlier version I began writing solo. That first version was about 3,000 words long and made it from the Xinhai Revolution to Yuan Shikai's death, so less than 3 years. If that ran its full length, I think we'd have had a book on our hands. Naturally, the script we ended up using included a lot of editing as we went along, but eventually we got it down to around 18,000 words. Right then I thought it was as short as we could get it, even if it skipped over some things. However, this was actually still too long for the 40-minute YouTube format. At Vincent's request, I spent about 10 to 12 hours paring this down to just under 16,000 words, and I have to admit to being somewhat proud of keeping nearly all of the core information intact. That said, the writing did suffer in places, even as it improved a little in others. I think it's rare for a creative to be truly satisfied with their final product, and even rarer for one to be fully happy with an adaptation to a different medium. Kaiserreich China probably deserves its own documentary series, but we just don't have the time or resources for it.
Question 5. What do you think are the most important chapters you had to omit from the final documentary cut? So if the episode were 4 hours, for example, what would be the first things you'd add back in?
Well, first off, it's less about chapters and more about nuance. The main things we skipped outright took place in the late 1910s and early 1920s. For example, the Anhui clique's struggle to assert control over Mongolia, and several figures like Xu Zhuzheng, who were important in the moment but ended up being unimportant in the long term. Most of those the documentary is better off without. That said, I would have liked to expand a little more on the international system China was subject to, the social dynamics at play during the time, and just the overall state China found itself in during the 1910s and 1920s. The more you read about the period, the more you realize just how much breadth and depth there was to the country. Huge distances, diversity, and a clash of cultures and technologies. I also would have enjoyed covering a few of the more absurd highlights of the era. Small anecdotes about figures from Zhang Zhongshang's poems to the massively incompetent Cao Ying. I guess I'll share the following excerpt from Waldron's From War to Nationalism. The context here is the Second Zhili-Fengtian War in 1924. Wu Peifu would assign responsibility to holding Jumenku to one of the worst units in the Zhili army, the 26th Division, under the command of Cao Ying, the president's incapable brother, of whom Lawrence Impey remarks that it was madness to permit him to get any nearer the front than some insignificant point in the lines of communication. The only explanation for Wu's move, other than the entanglement with the Cao clan from which he could never entirely free himself, may be that he thought the position impossible for even Cao Ying to lose. Anyone who has visited the spot will recognize that it is a position which is so strong as to be practically impregnable, as long as the defending force's ammunition holds out. But lose it, Cao Ying did. In the smoke and confusion of the battle, the Zhili artillery mistook their forces for the enemy and opened fire, killing most of their men. Later, the Zhili command dispatched artillery, but they used up their shells firing at their own men. Cao Ying fled, and most of his units disintegrated as well.
Following on that, if you could do it again, what would you do differently?
I'd probably write more of the script around footage, if possible. There's a very cool thing professional documentaries do, which is build little vignettes giving a feel for the time and place, while also conveying important information. Japan's War in Color does a good job of this, for example, using footage from the launch of the Datsun Model 70 to talk about Japanese industrialization. It's on YouTube if you're interested. That said, these probably would have added length we couldn't afford. Plus, we didn't really have enough footage to work with on this documentary, given the length and breadth of content we needed to cover. I'm sure there's more archival footage out there, but it's locked behind very expensive paywalls. Music is tough for similar reasons. Nearly all of it is still copyrighted, even if it's over 100 years old.
So, what is your favorite part of the documentary?
That's a tough one, so I'm going to have to cheat and pick two. The first is the reading of the Severn note at the beginning of the documentary. Although the text has been altered slightly from my original, it's really cool to hear the words I wrote way back in 2019 actually spoken and dramatized. Some of the art is also really impressive. Even his standardized Chinese made it in there, so kudos to the artists. Anyway, people put a lot of stock in historical speeches, be it Churchill's "We will fight on the beaches" or Roosevelt's "Day that will live in infamy," but for whatever reason they're somewhat uncommon in alternate history. So this is a bit of a counter to that trend, and I'd like to see that continue. The second is The Scholar, where he talks about the ineffectual nature of Wu Peifu's government of good men, and how a good man does not become a soldier. The quote about iron and men is real, and it just fits so well. I think I came across it when reading Diana Lowry's Warlord Soldiers some time ago, though don't quote me on that. Pun intended. Its integration, and this talking head section in general, gives a very brief window into some of the realities we don't have time to address elsewhere in the script. It's very easy to characterize the warlords as typical bad guys who are just there to exploit people, but the truth is often a lot more complex. It's easy to assume that well-meaning leaders will generate good outcomes, but that's not always true either. There's a lot of those nuances going on throughout this period, but unfortunately they're hard to touch on without meandering.
And who is your favorite personality in the script?
Many people gravitate toward the memes like Zhang Zhongchang, or their ideological waifus of whatever flavor. Personally, I'm a Zhang Zolin man. Talk about rags to riches, from the grandson of a refugee to a bandit, to the ruler of an area the size of France and Germany combined. Then considering his journey, he turned out remarkably okay. He was no saint for sure, but he actually did a reasonably good job running the Northeast and apparently had quite a few positive leadership qualities. Most of us, require some kind of education or apprenticeship or something to meet any standard of success, let alone run a country.
So to close off, there's a bit of a debate in the Kaiserreich community right now about a possible new China rework, where the discussion is about whether there should still be a Qing Empire in Kaiserreich lore. So what do you say to the people who feel the Qing restoration is unrealistic? Where do you fall on the matter?
This has to have a long answer, so bear with me. Kaiserreich has undergone a lot of change since its creation, but personally I think it's important for it to maintain a core identity. When I took over the China Rework project, I felt it was important to keep the core pillars of the rework and the region, which included the Qing. After all, this is alternate history and thus fiction. Realism isn't the be-all end-all goal. Going forward, some may disagree on what constitutes a pillar and what doesn't. The thin line between permissible fiction and acceptable realism will shift, and the mod will change again to reflect that. So be it. For now, though, with that line being where it is, the restoration is justified mainly by three things. One, the tendency of the old China hands in Germany, people who had done business and diplomacy in China during the Qing dynasty and saw it as the natural state of things. These same sorts of people essentially ran American and British China policy throughout the interwar years and into the late 1940s. It goes without saying that most of them were quite racist and held remarkably outdated views. Is restoring the Qing stupid? Yes. Would it have been stupid to them? Not necessarily. Two, Cao Kun's aim to consolidate his own wavering power within the Zhili clique. Cao is the main one who negotiates with the Germans, and he does so behind Wu Peifu's back, more or less forcing Wu into a position where he cannot turn down German demands in their entirety. Cao wants to use German power, Pu Yi and his control of the assembly, to limit Wu Peifu's influence. 3, this time, Wu Peifu's concerns about Sun Quanfang. Outside Zhang Zolin and his Fengtian clique, Sun Quanfang is by far the biggest threat to the northern Zhili by 1927, and Wu knows this. If some were to receive full German support, the Germans might leave Wu out to dry, emboldening Sun and leaving Wu caught between two enemies. Sun does embrace the Germans anyway, but they don't throw their full support behind him and actively try to prevent a Zhili civil war.
Okay, so that was Flamefang detailing some of his rationale for the inclusion of the Qing Empire, which right now is an ongoing, an ongoing debate within the Kaiserreich developer community and wider community as well, about whether the Qing Empire should be removed from future China rework updates. I know that's an ongoing thing. So, as always, Kaiserreich Documentary episodes are going to be a snapshot. They are going to be the lore as we understand it, the reworks that we've received, not as of publishing of the video, mind you, because that's actually an important distinction, because we write this episode roughly 1 year before production. So this is the lore as it was 1 year ago. I know that we did end up changing, David, you remember this, right? In the second half, we ended up rewriting the last 20% of the episode to include some more modern lore. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So,
yeah, right?
I think it has to do with the
Shanghai.
the situation in Guangzhou and the Liangguang clique, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not pronouncing that right. They
And
had
the
some
League of Eight
updates, so we need to.
provinces.
So we need to slightly change how that was going to happen, who was there, who wasn't there.
Yeah, so I cannot speak as to how up-to-date this documentary is right now with the most recent updates, but I know we did end up updating it 2 months ago to account for the newest things, which is also when we made that decision to split the episode, and because it was getting too crazy, we were working on that 2-hour-20.
Yeah, we made that decision late. It was very
Really
late in the development, actually.
But I know we discussed it during script writing as well, where we were like, okay, are we going to do this as a 2-hour thing? I remember telling you back then that I still have to write. I hadn't written or converted the Severn to animatic script format at that point. I was like, I cannot say how long this will take. I think it's gonna be a 2-minute, but then it became a 5 to 6 minutes animatic short, on top of what was already a 2-hour, 15-minute thing. And I think 1 hour is really the point where we should, for Kaiserreich Cinema projects, where we should be looking at, okay, this is probably where we want to split off, and we don't want to go to a situation where every episode is longer than the last, because that becomes an untenable situation. We can't make 8-hour episodes. It's too crazy. We'd spent 4 years producing a single video.
Yeah, no, that's totally not, unfortunately, not manageable. But yeah, we really debated if we were going to split it up eventually, because I remember
it was a pretty
at first we decided against it, and I was pretty opposed to it initially, because I felt like it would take away some of the drama, some of the tension in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But then initially we shortened it a bit, because the AI placeholder voiceover, which we worked with for quite a bit of time, was significantly slower than the voiceover by Patrick Warner. That was on purpose, because I'd rather shorten my animations than having to lengthen them, because the AI placeholder I worked with spoke faster than Patrick, but still getting to that massive, I was approaching that 3-hour mark slowly in one video. I was like, yeah, no way, that's not manageable anymore.
Yeah, because word count is a little difficult to balance out, but I do think it was good that we started with the placeholder voice, the generated one, just so we got an idea of where we were going with this edit. And it was,
if we only could start by the time we got Patrick's voice, documentary wouldn't have been here for quite a while.
Yeah. It's always difficult because Patrick has a very busy schedule. He's an on-set actor as well, so he needs.
Yeah, of course. So it's nice that we have this measure to temporarily put something in and have a sense of time and placement.
So what I like to do is I like to bring Patrick in at the absolute, when we're absolutely sure of the cut, absolutely sure of the script, with minimal amounts of pickups. Because if we go to pickups with Patrick, for example, could be that you meet him he's about to fly out for a show. He's a BBC actor, Patrick. He's flying out for a production, which means he's gone for 3 months. And then the problem with the recordings is you need studio time, right? He has a studio at home. If he's on set, then it gets complicated. Do we rent a studio, an actual sound studio? Do we build one where he is? And that gets super crazy expensive. At the end of the day, we're still a small company. We don't have, we can't just rent out a studio so we can get pickups from an actor who's halfway around the world. So these are all limitations,
Quick question in chat. Animation that you will not make a full documentary on. I guess there's quite a bunch of them. I don't really want to shut anything out right now, because especially given the nation we haven't touched on yet, it's a pretty safe bet that we're not going to make any documentaries on nations that we've already covered in the Kaiserreich. In Kaiserreich episodes themselves, as kinds of aligned nations that are part of this block. For Germany, we discussed Poland, United Baltic Duchy, Finland, Ukraine, White Ruthenia, and I think for Austria-Hungary we also discussed Italy a lot. We did a lot with the Balkans.
Serbia.
Yes, we did Serbia. In the Ottomans we did a lot of North Africa. We did Greece is a bit of a weird one actually, but probably
Greece
won't
fits
be
into several of these. Yeah, it fits into Balkan politics as well, into Ottoman. No,
because Greece also definitely fits into Bulgaria, where it's been discussed a lot.
Yeah, so the additional question is, do we go to an additional level of granularity for something like a secondary or minor power in Kaiserreich?
Yes.
Which is generally not something we like doing. So here the question, I think, was about Japan. That was asked, and I don't think we're going to do a full documentary on Japan, because so much of Japan is in relationship to China. So if you go do a separate Japan documentary, you end up talking about the Chinese Civil War again. And we already have a 2-hour episode here where we are talking in depth about the Chinese Civil War. where Japan features a lot, mostly through their Fengchen proxy, of course. But we try and sort of, we call it the Chinese Civil War, but it is episode, but it is more broadly, you know, Eastern China theater and regional power conflicts there. We go a little bit more into this. Sorry, what were you saying there?
No, I want to say it's pretty apparent, also especially in part 2, that Japan kind of looms large as this more villainous power in the story of China.
Yeah.
But they're a bit in the background. But just as Vinda was saying, it's the meat of what happens in China is the meat of Japanese policy as well, because Japan is really defined by its imperialism, and China is its main objective. So there won't really be a lot that we can say in a Japanese documentary based on the current lore that we have of Japan that would make it interesting.
Yeah. So I think these highly specific, you know, even more granularity for secondary nations that are secondary and have already been featured in a Kaiser documentary episode is generally not going to happen. I can't say for sure what the order is going to be for future episodes. I think Second American Civil War is highly likely now with the rework. After that, I can't say. I know we're going to have to talk about Africa at some point because we do have a large section there about Middle Africa, for example, and also continuing the storyline of the dissolution of the British Empire, which is pretty interesting. So it may be, because it would be difficult to talk about Oceania, for example, in a specific episode, so maybe it would be more like an Africa plus Oceania episode, where it's more about collapse of the British Empire, talking about these crown colonies, India, Africa, and Oceania together. What do you think?
I think that would be an interesting idea. Maybe it would be good to have India and Australia separate, and to also include a bit more on Southeast Asia, which hasn't really had a lot of time in the spotlight. But I think that's the decision that's better made later.
Yeah.
Currently, we are
have to wait as well.
Nowhere near. Oh, I haven't taken the poll in a while. Oh, it looks like you're buying me a beer.
Finally. No.
South America should also definitely get some content. I feel like it's important. South America is generally not the most dynamic region in alt histories, because it's, you know, there's always this alt history meme that it doesn't change. South America is always the exact same or radically different, and I think in Kaiserreich lore, out of the top of my head, it's fairly similar. It does, of course, have have Patagonia independent, where we do have a World of Kaiserreich,
and the Workers' Front, and essentially the first syndicalist uprising.
Yes.
Thing that South America, yeah.
Yeah, so we do have that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we can spend a bit of time talking about Latin America in a similar kind of Kaiserreich dossier style that we also did for Bulgaria.
Yeah, you can make them shorter. You don't have to.
That would be possible. And then we could talk about like nations like Brazil, Argentina, but also Mexico, Cuba, stuff like that.
What we could do is, when we really reach the end of the series, because that is something that is actually coming in view right now, where we're reaching a point where the major lore chapters of Kaiserreich are all covered, especially after Second American Civil War. Then you get the Commonwealth, British Commonwealth.
Yes.
And then you get shorter elements. So what you can do is you can basically we can bundle them all into an episode, well, one project, but then we release them separately as small epilogue dossiers, for example, where it's like a 10-20 minute lore covering of a smaller nation. That's one way you could resolve that.
Yeah, definitely. And you can also do a lot with the World of Kaiserreichs to give a vibe of the region, or what's been going on. Like we've done that for Italy, where
Patagonia.
Yeah, exactly. For Italy, there's a lot of actual factual stuff and a documentary style narration in the Austria-Hungary one, which is very closely tied to what's happening there. Yeah. But more of the vibes and the atmosphere of actually what it's like to play in Italy and have that more personal perspective.
Yeah,
that's what the World of Kaiserreich does, and I feel like Japan is probably can go a similar route. So I talked to Vincent earlier. A World of Kaiserreich Japan is definitely in the cards.
All right, I want to take us to the end of the live stream because we have 30 minutes until the main video release, in where I will be in live chat, just hanging out, also giving away some of the last Easy Red 2 keys. So for those of you that are now eagerly waiting for part 2 of this documentary, we will see you on next week, Sunday, around this time as well. We are going to release the second part, which is KR-Doc 10 now, to the episode. There's not going to be a live stream for that. It's just going to be the live chat that happens on YouTube Premiere. So we'll be hanging out in chat. So David, if you want to come, if you're free that day, I'll just be hanging out doing ER2 giveaway prize questions.
I'll probably, you know, given the time, might call it a night here, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. So to everyone, thank you for attending.
Thank you very much. I see that Zhang Zhou is making a final push. But it's still Wu Peifu still has it. He still got it. So I think we should call it.
In a very Chinese election way, I'm just gonna end the poll when it's in my favor. There I go. I won.
Of course. Then I'm looking forward to that beer.
Okay, so no, what we're going to do, guys, there is a second part release coming up next week Sunday. There is another trailer which is called Fall of the Kuomintang, which is the Letters of Jinhua part of that second KR-Doc 10 part of this documentary, turned into a trailer. This is the one that has the most Arma 3 machinima footage. I know we haven't mentioned the Arma 3 footage, but maybe we'll do a thing with Blarcy later on, who is our machinima artist, because that's one thing we're trying to also find footage by doing things in engine. And I think he does really cool projects in Arma 3, and we're trying to bring that into our projects.
We'll talk more about
that in the future. Yeah, I think that stuff, what we need that stuff for is when it gets really weird. When we're looking at, we need German, for the German Cold War video. Now we need Germans in Vietnam. Now it gets really hard to find footage, you know. Now we're really, really in the woods with things that absolutely have not happened. That's when the machinima stuff comes in, I think. That's the thing we're experimenting with. We will talk more about that in the future. But until then, I think we can wrap it here. David, it's been an incredible project, an incredible privilege to work with you, as always.
Yeah, likewise. Of course.
So we are now taking it back some 1,200 years, I want to say. Going back to the Middle Ages, taking it medieval. And we will reconvene when we announce the American Kingdoms Volume 1 projects. And you will talk
first
about
we first got part 2 of this.
Okay, yeah, but we're not live streaming for part 2. So the next time they'll be seeing us, and maybe I should get a like a night helmet for the live stream to be completely in theme. No, guys, thanks for all the support as always. Join your newsletter, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or whatever you prefer. We're on every channel, and I will see you all for the next one. And I'm gonna take you. I think I have an outro element here. No, I may have forgotten to put it up. No, there's no outro element. I'm just going to say thanks for all the support, guys, and we will talk soon. Don't forget to join the Discord. All right, guys. David, we're signing off.
Thanks so much, everyone.
All right. See you guys. Have a good one. Now we actually need to hold because it needs to run for 10 seconds, and when I cut the stream... Or is it already cut?
I don't know.
Oh no. Oh shit, it's already... Crap, we're still live! We're still live! No, guys, I'm gonna cut here. Thank you all for all support, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye.